Okay, good afternoon. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Shelley Gartner, Elementary Math Consultant.
And I'm Jocelyn Reinhook, Secondary Math Consultant.
So having a waiting room, I think, is super effective.
Okay.
But it's also challenging.
There we go.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah. We can just step back.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good afternoon. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Shelley Gartner, Elementary Math Consultant.
And I'm Jocelyn Reinhook, Secondary Math Consultant.
So just a couple notes here for housekeeping reasons, just to make it easier with our bandwidth. If you can please make sure that your video camera is turned off. That makes it a little bit easier on our end, as well as that your mic is muted. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session, so that at that time you can unmute yourself and ask questions. As well, we are recording this session, so that also helps if your camera is turned off, then just makes it a little bit easier. So if you will please put yourself in the presence of our Lord, and we will start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, the hour of our death. Amen. Saint Paul, pray for us. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. And our territorial acknowledgement that this session is taking place in the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. So our introductions here with Jocelyn and myself, and we are pleased today to be hosting a number of special guests from Knowledgehook. So we have Chad Bewley, Teacher Outreach Program Coordinator. Mark McKenzie is from Nelson, the publishing company. He's a Learning Solutions Manager and is local to Calgary. We have Laura McJanet Brogan, also from Nelson, a Digital Solutions Manager. And Lionel Logan Nathan from Ontario, right? And I think, is that it, Lionel? Do you want to unmute yourself? I'm not sure if I've missed anyone.
No, that's, I think we've got John Grady, who's the regional manager at Nelson on the call as well. But thank you for having us, folks. We really appreciate being here with you.
Wonderful. So on that note, we are going to turn it over to Laura, and she will take us through the Knowledgehook presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, can I just get a thumbs up, or you let me know if you can see my screen? I'm going to assume if you can see it, everyone can see it.
Yeah, you're good to go, Laura. Looks great.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone so much for joining us today to learn a little more about Knowledgehook. So today we're going to spend our time focusing on formative assessment. We're going to talk about what Knowledgehook is and how it can support formative assessment in the classroom. We're going to do a deep dive demo on how Knowledgehook can be used with your students. We're then going to turn the tables and have you all engage in a Knowledgehook activity so that you can get a sense of the fun and engaging platform. And we will be sure to leave time at the end of our presentation for questions. So by all means, feel free to put your questions in chat as they come up, and we'll be sure to go through all of them at the end of our presentation. So Knowledgehook is an instructional guidance system made for teachers. It is a Canadian company that has only been on the market for just over 4 years, but has made a huge impact already. It's already won awards from Google and BNN Bloomberg, and currently has over 1 million users across North America. Knowledgehook's vision can be broken down into 3 points. The first is that we believe every child can become a math rock star with the right encouragement and instruction. The second part of our vision is that encouragement and instruction are driven by the teacher. And finally, we believe that if we make the right investment in our teachers, we will turn every student in the world into a math rock star. So here's the million-dollar question that we believe you are all trying to answer, that we also want to set out to answer as well. And that is, what can I do today to reliably improve math outcomes for my students tomorrow? Student education and learning has been extensively studied over the past few decades. Tens of thousands of studies have been done, and clear conclusions about what is proven to work have emerged. Two studies that stand out are from Dylan William and John Hattie. Through over 1,000 meta-analysis, 50,000 studies observing over 240 million students. Their studies demonstrated that perhaps the most powerful process for systematically improving educational outcomes is the formative assessment cycle. It stands to reason that based on evidence, if a district is working to improve outcomes, they need to ensure that formative assessment cycles are successfully being completed with a high degree of proficiency. We know that, as you see on the screen, that formative assessment is perhaps one of the most effective practices when it comes to improving academic achievement. Based on evidence, if you're trying to improve outcomes for students, you need to successfully incorporate formative. So then it really comes down to, what is formative assessment? And we believe it's broken down to these 4 steps. Oops, sorry guys. It's measuring student learning, identifying a learning gap in knowledge, informing your instruction, and then going to close that gap. So it's just 4 steps. What? Oh.
Laura?
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. We're getting a little bit, like your mic is kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure if it's the headphones and.
Yeah, let me, I have my headphones on, but I'll just take a walk through my house to see if I can find.
You know what? It's much better right now, whatever you just did.
Slide, maybe I'll just take it back to the beginning of this one.
Sounds great, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, no problem. I think if I can just get like a sign from someone in the chat. Oh, it's better now. Thanks, Sharon.
Better?
Yeah, okay.
Merci, Sharon.
Thank you.
We're good to go.
I'm in Cochrane, so sometimes I wonder if the internet's a little weaker out this way. I can't, that's not a fact. That's just my theory. All right, well, I'll just go back to the beginning of this slide then, which is just breaking down the 4 steps of formative assessment: measuring student learning, identifying a learning gap in knowledge, informing your instruction, and then going back to close the learning gap. So these 4 steps sound simple, and if that is the case, then why doesn't it happen? There are a lot of really good reasons. Formative assessment can be very difficult to do regularly. So these are all the checkboxes that you need to hit to effectively apply formative assessment. And as you can see, there can be a lot of obstacles in your way to doing this. And you'll know all of these well-being teachers. The first one is the lack of time. Preparing questions, marking, analyzing results, and giving feedback and adjusting instruction can be very time-consuming. There's also default techniques to gauging your class understanding. For example, you might ask a student in your class that you know is probably going to know the answer, instead of eliciting full class feedback. There's also some types of formative assessment that are a little lower level and off the cuff. For example, do you understand? Hands up, hands down, thumbs up, thumbs down. These don't give us an accurate idea of what the students may be struggling with. We need information in order to adjust instruction, as opposed to just reteaching the same lesson. And there's also flexibility, not knowing where to go next once you have identified that there is a needed gap. And you really do need to do the cycle over and over again, even just on one topic. You just need to ensure that these key markers are all achievable so that they can unlock the outcomes that we know are possible through research. And Knowledgehook's entire goal is to make all these steps in the formative assessment cycle achievable for teachers in a way that is easy to use and is manageable with the time that you have. So we're going to be covering all 4 of these steps in our 2 sessions together. But today we're going to focus specifically on measuring student learning and what that looks like for you and your students within Knowledgehook. So I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague Chad Bewley, who's going to give everyone a chance to see just how Knowledgehook can achieve all of this for you.
Okay, so folks, I just wanted to chime in. And it's really sorry about the audio that was cutting out there. Hopefully the Wi-Fi in Chad's place is going to be working a little bit better, but we will definitely make a copy of the deck available, and we'll go over it in more detail.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, Chad sounds great, and we see
Okay.
the screen just fine.
And you guys can see my screen right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, everyone. So my portion here is going to be a little bit interactive with you guys. So what I'm going to need you to do is to open up a separate browser on your computer. We're going to get you guys kind of set up. So as I go through, you can go through on your own as well. So I'm going to need everyone to go to khmath.com. Let me log out and kind of walk you guys through this. So we're going to be going to this page here, khmath.com, and we're going to be registering an account to start. So I'm going to give you guys a second to kind of jump on this page. And once we go there, I'll kind of walk you through the steps so we can get started. And then as I go through the tool, you'll be able to join in along with me.
So Chad, there's a great question in the chat here. Someone asked if they already have an account, should they just log into their existing account?
Yes, please just log into your account. That'll make it easy because the things that we're going to go through will be directly beneficial to your account, so you might as well be doing it in there. So for those of you who don't, I mean, if you do, you can just log in front here. If you don't, you can click on register as a teacher, put in your information, your email, you can create your own password, click register. It'll ask you what grade level you're teaching. You put that in, and then it'll take you to the home page. So for me, I'm going to log in with my account now, and then I'll start walking through as you guys get there. So for those of you who are logging in, if you have any questions, I'm sure these guys will be able to help you in the chat. I'm going to continue on moving from this point. So you'll enter this page where you can create your own class. During the register process, it kind of asks you to create your own class, so you can start with that. I've created kind of a remote learning class for us today to kind of walk through everything. So in my remote learning class, I also have a couple students that I've already preloaded who have done some things for us that we can see. But the first thing you'll do when you get into your class is you're going to see a student page, and this part will be empty except for the add student. Now, there are two ways to add your own students. The first way to add your students is they can sign in under your account, your class code, and they can put in their name, or you can create their accounts for them. So all they have to do when they come in is click on their name and then type in the password. You can also download student instructions to get started and share that out through an email to them so that they can get on their own. So when we're done this, I'll have you guys jumping in as a student as well, so you'll be able to walk through that process in a little bit more detail. Like I said, I've already preloaded some students here for us. So the first thing we want to do is I kind of want to level set your ideas about Knowledgehook. Knowledgehook is a really in-depth tool with a lot of different features, and the more time you spend with it, the further you'll be able to dive into it. I usually reference it as an iPhone. If you're using your iPhone to text and make calls, that is the purpose of the iPhone, and that is amazing. But you're also shortchanging yourself because there's so much more you could be doing with that tool. There's so many different ways to use it. And so we're going to kind of walk through an overview of the tool and try and briefly discuss some of those deeper dive issues, and then we'll be getting into them more next time. But just so we know here, the main piece of Knowledgehook is our activities page. When you go into the activities page, you can pick your grade level all the way through, and you can pick activities from warm-ups, which are before you get into a lesson to kind of see where the student's knowledge is from the year before, so you kind of have an idea, like a diagnostic going in. You can pick based on different strands, and you can go in and you can actually see different activities. All these different activities that you're picking from can be assigned as a game show or a mission. Now, the difference between these two things, a game show is meant to be done in a similar situation to what we're in. It's supposed to be a live group activity. If in September you're teaching in the classroom, this is a great activity to run with everyone in the room. It creates discussion points. Everyone can talk. You can look at different ways of handling different situations, and that's perfect for that situation with making an interactive classroom. If you're not in the classroom, or when you're using it or coming up in the next week or so, you can still do this if you have everyone logged in at the same time. So that's what a game show is, and you'll be able to see what I mean at the end of this presentation when I kind of take you guys through that. What I really want to focus on here is assigning a mission. A mission is more self-paced, so you can set up your activity, pick your questions, go through it that way, assign it to students. They can log in on their own time and they can work through it on their own time, and then a report will be given back to you as to where your students are and what has been finished so far. So that's missions, and that's really, really useful right now in this kind of remote educational environment that we're in. So highlight missions for you. When you go in, you can assign it to individual people, or you can assign it to your entire class. So when I go in and I click on assign as a mission, it takes me to this, and I can rename it whatever I want. If I so choose, I can name it Activity 1, and that's what students will see. So they're not going to know what the grade level is if you have students working at different grade levels within your class. And you go to advanced settings, and you can assign to individuals. So let's say Jimmy is working at a grade 5 level and Lionel's working at a grade 6 level. I can assign Jimmy a grade 5 activity, entitle it Activity 1 for Jimmy, and I can have a grade 6 activity for Lionel, Activity 1 for Lionel, and they can both go and have Knowledgehook time to work on their activity with no idea they're working at different grade levels. So that's a really unique feature that we have as well in terms of how we can assign things, or if you want to assign a whole class diagnostic or everyone's working at the same level, you can just go to class and assign to all and launch it. You can also assign activities ahead of time and have them launch at certain times without you having to go back in there if you already have your class kind of scheduled out as to where they are. So that's the difference between a game show and a mission and the details within it. Now, the best part about our activities is there's already preloaded curriculum, and everything that we have is curriculum aligned. So you can take from our questions, but at the same time, you can create your own activities as specific to your class as you want. You can edit the material that we have in there. You can create your own questions, and you can do a mix of both. So I can always add to. If I really like this question, I like how it looks, I can add to and add it to a custom activity. So there's different things like that that you can do. You can edit within. I make a copy and I edit this directly. Edit question. Maybe I don't want it to be a multi-select. Maybe I just want it to be one correct answer. I can change the answer type. Free form, real number. I can have them type out the answer. I can have them work with manipulatives within the tool, multiple choice or multi-select. I can change the question. I can add specific student names in, so it makes it a little bit more personal and it's a little bit more fun for them as they go through. I can even add math manipulatives in the questions as I work through them. So these are all the different things that you can do to edit questions that we have, but you can also, I'm just going to jump out of this quickly. If we go back to this activities page, I can also go and create my own personal custom activity. So when I go to custom activities on that drop-down list, create custom activity, I basically get a blank work page, and I can create a question, brand new, fresh, and walk through it that way. I can add a content slide as I go through, and you have multiple options to work through. And like I said before, this is a portion of the tool that is very much like an iPhone, where there's so much that you can dive into here. We could do an entire webinar on creating custom activities by itself. But I just want you to kind of be able to walk through and see some of the tools here. We've already had you guys register, and some of you already have accounts who have logged in. So you can play around, set that up, look through there. You can even have fun questions to kind of pace math. One of the best parts about Knowledgehook is it really takes away from that math anxiety for students, and they can start to enjoy it. And what I tend to do is whenever I run game shows, my first question is something funny and relevant. For example, who's the best Marvel superhero? And you put in your answers, and then the whole class can get into an argument. Everyone starts talking, so that when you get into the math portion of it, people are already free flowing, they're open, they're talking, and it creates a really, really good environment. So that's what activities are, and the two different types of activities, and how you can make your own custom or edit the ones that we already have there. The curriculum is all here, and you can pick from different strands. You can pick from different grade levels. You can bookmark activities that you've already run. I have one that we're going to be going through later. And at this portion here, when you're assigning or deciding whether you want to assign, and you go to view to see, you'll see things like this little light bulb. And this little light bulb is going to be very important for us later, because it takes us to all of our teacher support documents, a math background, a misconception chart, or remediation questions that help with a lot of the other stuff that we're trying to do. Because as much as this is fun for students and is engaging for students, the whole point of Knowledgehook is that we're helping teachers, right? We want to be able to help you deepen your pedagogical content knowledge, help you understand different misconceptions, tips, different strategies. We want to add to your tool belt all the different ways that you can expand, develop as a teacher, and help your students. So whether you are horrible at math like me, and you were never great at, and you don't know much about it, and you need the basics, or you're a super genius and you have 10 PhDs in math, missing steps is something that happens to all of us. For the most elite person in anything, it's very difficult to understand sometimes why a young student might be struggling with something for the first time looking at it. And so those are some of the support documents that we have that really help with that. Once you assign a mission or an activity and students start working on it, the first place I'll take it is live mode. So if you've assigned a mission and you have a certain amount of time for everyone to kind of work on it, you can go over here to live mode. And what's going to happen is you're going to see a drop-down list of all your student names. And there's going to be a legend. And the legend is going to show you, one, that they're working on a question. Two, inside there's going to be a number that's going to tell you how many times they've attempted that question. The green light, the little dot before the name is going to show you whether they're online or not online. And then the little band above the box will show you if they've got the answer correct or if they're still working on it. So if you see a couple boxes in a row with a red band, that identifies to you that a student has worked on that question multiple times and they continuously get it wrong and they're struggling in this area. So that is one way we really highlight for you as they're working to be able to get a quick glance as to where everyone is. For some of you who may possibly be back in the classroom, one thing to remember is if you're at the front teaching and everyone's working on things in the room, to give you a snapshot to see who's on Facebook and who's actually doing their work, that's a quick way to be at the front and to be able to monitor, make sure that everyone's online and working through, and it lets you go and be able to help out specifically whichever student is struggling in any area. So I think the live mode is very, very useful and very interesting as well. Now going back to the overall reports, and I'll show you this again once we finish our game show, but right at the end, as soon as you're done a game show, and I actually did one a little bit earlier today, when you go in, you can now see the game show that has been run. You can see how your class did on each question. You can see some of the questions with light bulbs that indicate that it links you to that student gap information. And you can see how your class did. If I'm screen sharing with everybody, we have our names hidden so no one can feel embarrassed about their answers. But at the same time, as a teacher, if I need to look at reports, I can go in and I can click and see everyone's name as we go through. So that's a quick way where you can use it where you're sharing versus not screen sharing for yourself and for other people. Within our activities, one thing I didn't mention before, through our custom or even our editing on some of them, you can add an upload focused question. You can actually turn on a toggle that allows students to upload pictures of their work. Now, the pictures of their work go to their own student portfolio. So to give you an example of what that looks like, although after you sign an activity or a game show, all the reports show up here for your entire class, you can look at a very specific student, either by going next to the report tab here on portfolio, or by going to your students here and clicking on their name. You can see the work that they've done. You can see what they struggled to do, their areas of improvement, and you can see their strengths as you work through material. You can see the missions assigned. You can see the live mode reports and how it looks. And if they've sent anything in, you'll be able to have their own student portfolio, which will show you all the answers that they've sent in. So that's two ways you get a little more in-depth look at your students. Speaking of, I didn't mention this before, but when your students come in, a lot of times they can forget their password, and then you have to go through the help desk and go through all these problems to go figure it out. We kind of empower the teacher. You can reset their password and let them back in again. You can edit it. You can change their name. You can do a lot of things with each student, so you don't have to worry about a student coming in and being silly, because you are in full control of all of that. So back to our reports page now. We've discussed portfolio, upload questions. Well, what happens if I'm struggling? Where do I go from there? Well, if your students are struggling, what's going to happen is you're going to get an alert from the student gaps that are getting triggered. Once these gaps are triggered, you're going to see what the area of struggle is, which student struggled with it, and this all comes from your assigned material. This is not a black box that you give to your student and then they pop out at the end and you're like, how to go? No, this actually walks you through the process with them and gives you immediate, direct, and specific feedback to where they're at and where they're struggling. When we go through this, it's not an assign and leave it tool. It's something that you really kind of work alongside with them. And so if I've assigned dividing multi-digit numbers and say little Lionel is struggling, I can go view our teacher supports that we have. And then once I kind of solve that problem, this will pop up, because what I'll do is I'll run another activity over that covers that problem area, and we'll see if my student has improved or not, and I'll know if I was really able to affect them and help them in that area. So that's one of the other things we have, where we have that student gap feedback type loop within the system for you. You can also go to help requests, and on our help requests, students can ask, hey, I'm struggling in this area, could you please help me out? And you can show different answers and you can walk them through stuff here. So this is another way we try and create that feedback loop of information for you as a teacher to really see exactly where your students are and where they're struggling and where you need to focus your lesson planning and your support for them. Now, what does Knowledgehook do in terms of supporting teachers now that we've given you this information? We're not just throwing information at you saying, hey, everybody's struggling, figure it out. We've actually, and what I showed you before with the light bulb, actually highlighted different pieces of information that we have for you. So the first one that we have is our math background document. And this is to help support you before your lesson. So imagine it's a Sunday night, you have a nice little fireplace, maybe a glass of wine, and you want to do some reading by the fire. Open up Knowledgehook, pull out your math background. You have 4 to 5 pages as you walk through there. So it's bite-sized and it's specific to the area that you're working with. This one, I had a student struggling with dividing multi-digit numbers. I had just assigned it to them. I can go and look through the math background. Well, why would someone struggle with it? What can I look for? The math background is supposed to be before the lesson, but it can always help you no matter where you are, right? And this is supposed to help you, inform you, so you have look-fors before you start teaching. What we have for after the mistake is made is we have our misconception chart, which is that second section. And it'll say, if you ask this, what happened? What did you see? What can you do? What are some tips and tricks and different strategies to work through? What am I seeing and what does it mean? So it really, really nails down specifically what some of the misconceptions could possibly be. For me, one of the things that was really interesting, and I'll show you again when we're going to the game show, is it highlighted for me how fractions could be confusing in terms of highlighting squares. So when we get to the game show at the end of all this and we kind of walk through that, I'll be able to show you exactly what I mean there. But this has been kind of very useful for me because there's a lot of things that you would never expect a student to miss, because as adults, we just take it in so naturally. But there's so many different steps for people who are seeing it for the first time, and this kind of outlines that specific to the area of struggle. And lastly, we have a question chart of different questions to ask for those misconceptions. So if you're struggling in this area, here are the questions you ask. When you ask these questions, you go back to the misconception chart and you take it, well, I asked this question, what am I seeing? What does that mean? So it highlights exactly what the area of struggle is and why it is, and then tips and strategies to help you remediate that area. So that's what our support documents do. It's very in-depth and very helpful. I'm not going to go into too much depth right now on our impact challenge, which is the full formative assessment cycle. We'll be doing that more in our next meeting, but to start it, you would select your focus area from one of your student gaps, preferably, so that you're working on an area that helps your students as well. And it kind of walks you through the whole formative assessment cycle and really takes you into an in-depth look at how to go through that. So that's our activities, our game shows and our missions. That is our reports, our portfolio, our student upload, our live, our gaps, our help requests, our teacher supports. And on top of all of that, we still have more features that we want to walk you through. So I know I'm going really fast and I'm covering a ton of material here. Before I dive into this last little section, are there any questions or anything that you guys have struggled with as you've been looking through with me that I can kind of help you with at this moment?
Chad, there's been a lot of questions in the chat that we've been kind of answering as you go. So, which
okay, perfect.
So great to see all the questions coming up here in the feedback.
Awesome. All right, then. I'm going to continue with kind of our last section before we walk through the actual game show part of it. So we also understand that education is a complete environment for the student, which means it's in the classroom and it's at home. And right now, with the remote learning environment that we're in, a lot of it is stuck at home. And if there's no support at home, and if it's very difficult at home, it's very hard to have everyone on the same page and create that positive environment for the student. So we also have within our tool a parent share. And what that is you can share reports specific, so student-specific reports to that student's parent about their progress. You have full control over what things you send home. Just because you have a parent linked doesn't mean everything gets sent to them. You have to specifically choose what you want to send, and that kind of gives them a short breakdown as to what you've done. So I'll give you an example here. What parents will see is milestones that have been shared in an email, and parents can send back support, and it can give you a brief look at what's going on. For parents to be connected, they have to give approval, and the student has to add their email or phone number, and you have to give approval of what they can do and what they can see. So whenever you want to send something home, you have that choice. And that kind of completes the loop that brings in the parent, that lets them know what's going on in the classroom, where things are, and hopefully they can help you guys because they're actually the ones with the students at this point in time in terms of making sure they get on or helping them where there are problems. So that is our parent feature as well that kind of brings everything back full circle. Now, there's been a ton here, and I know you guys have had a ton of questions, and we kind of been going through everything pretty quickly. But while you're in the tool, if you're ever struggling, we can always go down here, and you have a live customer support person that you can message and ask questions to at our Zendesk, and they'll respond really quickly. You have our help center, which has a lot of useful information and documents. I hope this will open up for me and it won't take me too long. But you have short videos, you have little tips and helps as you go through, you have support articles and a live chat. So there's tons of different support for anything that we've talked about. If you have any questions while you're there, you can go through all of that. You can email us, check out our support articles, you can go to the live chat. But those are the things that I find really, really useful within Knowledgehook that you can do as you're working. It's not this distant thing where we're human, we're just like you guys, and we're here to help. So anytime you guys need anything, feel free to dive in there as well. So that is kind of a brief, quick walkthrough of the tools that we have. Lionel, Laura, I'm not sure if there's anything else in there that I might have missed or anything else you'd like me to cover. If there is, please jump in on your mic, let me know. And if not, then I'll be going over to kind of running the game show. So I'll just kind of give you a second to think if there's anything else, and then I'll jump over to the student side. Yes.
There was a good question from Elizabeth in regards to manipulative questions or what we call visual math questions. Can you just do me a favor in activities? Would you be able to just show everybody how they could identify which assessments actually have visual math questions in them, and then also show them where in featured activities they can access all the visual math questions?
Okay, so when you go over to featured activity, you go over to our activities, there's a featured activities which kind of run along the top here. And you can see that we have some of these visual math activities here. If you click in, you'll be able to see this. This little Rubik's Cube looking thing, you'll be able to find on normal questions on the other page. So as I go through here, I can look in and it should pop up here if they have any. So for example, right here, I know that this has visual math component to it. And I can go in and take a look at what that might be and how they can work. How would you move the cow over? You can see different answers. You can change things within the question for the visual math and how it looks for the students. You have multiple different things where you can draw lines on the screen to help show. I'm going to take us through an actual visual math question, which has a bunch of different things here. So as we go through, there are a multitude of different ways to work with. You can change things on the screen and move different models so that students are working with actual live tools instead of just trying to work on their own and then type in an answer or click from a bunch of different answers. You actually can work with these images and move them and do different things with them as they're answering. To kind of help work through the math. So that's the manipulatives that we have within the tool, and that's kind of what the visual math really brings out, so that they're working beyond just the multiple choice questions. So as we talked about earlier with the custom activities, there are so many different ways to change your questions where it's not just multiple choice the entire way through, and our visual math and our manipulatives are one of those ways. Does that kind of help answer that question, Lionel? Is there any more around that you'd like me to dive into?
No, Chad, I think that's great. There's a ton of different question types that are built into Knowledgehook. So even with the visual math questions, or as you may call them, manipulative questions, there's a variety of different inputs that you can play around with. There's over 900 of these types of questions that are found throughout the test bank. Again, as Chad has mentioned, they're denoted by the little Rubik's Cube, and you can always preview them before you include them in any of your assessments.
Yeah, and if you guys are looking at my screen right now, you can actually see visually what that looks like as students are working through. You have questions, and they can kind of work with the material to try and figure it out, drawing extra things, different points there. And the answers will change as they're doing it. There are number lines, there are pictures, there are filling in squares for ratios, there is graphs, there's charting, there's a lot of different ways that you can use tools within, right? So again, talking about filling up squares for fractions and how that looks in terms of answering. So those are the different types of things that we have in line with our visual math. Okay, well, if that's it, what I'm going to ask you guys to do right now is, it's going to take a second, but for everyone who's logged in as a teacher and has been kind of following along with us, I'm going to ask you to please log out as a teacher completely, because you're going to be logging in as a student, and we don't want the system being confused as to who you are. So make sure that either you open an incognito browser, which is something private and separate from your teacher account, or you just log out of your teacher account. I'm going to take us to an activity that I have already created and kind of set up for us. It's a quick, short activity that we're going to walk through so that you understand what it's like to be on the student side. It's also, as you can tell with these light bulbs, linked to gaps. And I can even, before we get in, click on the light bulb and go to that math background document before I go into this, before I assign this, so that I can prepare pre-lesson as well. So I want to make sure that you know that that teacher support documents that are there for us to find as well. Now, I'm going to go here and click play game show for us. Make sure that guests are allowed to play. You don't need to sign in. If you sign in or click on a student name, it's because you're trying to build up that student portfolio, which is what your students will do. But for today, especially seeing as we have so many people, we're going to go to guest. So please make sure you sign in as a guest. And I'm going to invite students. So what's going to happen now is, on that second browser that you have, or on that teacher screen after you've logged out, I'm going to ask you guys to go to joinkh.com. Okay. When you go to joinkh.com, you're going to put in the class code and enter join as a guest. And this is my class code, ART3824. And then you're going to sign in there. We already have one person in, and we'll wait for a couple people. Again, one thing that I really want to impress upon you guys is this is teacher paced. What that means is we have 100 people in here. Maybe a couple people are taking too long or can't get in. I do not have to wait for everyone to jump in for me to start. And as they jump in, they'll be able to dive into the game show as we go. So
Chad,
I know this is going to, yes?
I just want to make one quick point here. Unfortunately, we don't have a way from your teacher account for you to be able to see what the student sees. So this is a great opportunity, if you're able to join this game show, for you to see this from a student's perspective. And Chad, if you could just scroll up so everybody can see the code. We're going to put the code in the chat as well. It's ART3824. And again, you can just create any sort of account. You're probably not going to go back and do it again. But thank you for the question on the student view. But this is a great opportunity for you folks to see what your students would see, and this won't take very long. So feel free to join if you can. Otherwise, just follow along, and you'll be able to see the teacher view that Chad is going to walk through.
We have a ton of people already in, and for the sake of time and internet bandwidth, I'm going to jump in, and if anyone wants to continue to join, they're more than welcome. So I don't, like I was saying, it's teacher paced. I don't have to wait for everyone. If I go to start, people will still be joining in, and they still have time to jump into the game. So here's our first question. As a teacher, the first thing I would like to highlight for you is, on this here, the answers are not in the same order as they are on your device. So if everyone can just take a second from answering, I want you to look at the answers on your device, and then I want you to look at the answers on the screen. The reason why it's different is, in a classroom, as you're going through this all at the same time, you don't want someone looking over someone's shoulder and being like, oh, it's the first one. Now you're going to know where your classroom's at. It's kind of keeping everyone accountable and kind of building integrity within your classroom, because it's always different. But what that means for the teacher is, you now have to make sure that you're answering by what the answer is. I can't say, oh, it's the first one. I have to say, hey, it's 2/5 orange, because on everyone's screen, it's going to be a little bit different. So that is one key thing to highlight. And the second thing I want to highlight at this point is, we have 56 people that have answered. I can stop it at any point. Maybe someone's not going to answer. So let me end the question, and we'll see where everyone is. We have some people who answered wrong, and it's perfectly okay. And now we can discuss, well, why would someone think it's 3/5 orange? Oh, are they counting this side? Are they and you can discuss the different ways of looking at things. This is also a great time to discuss different strategies to come to certain answers. So when you're sharing or when you're interacting with your students, or if you're back in the classroom, this is a great way to create discussion and exploration by your students into it. Now I'm going to go to the next question. And we get a nice little GIF. It's fun, it's happy. The kids are always laughing at this. This is a small piece that helps deal with that math anxiety. It makes it easier on the students as they're going through. Question number 2, again, a little bit different, same type of concept here. And they become a little bit more complex as you go through a lot of our activities. Because this is teacher paced, I can always look at this and say, hey, you know what? I don't need to go over this question. We've already gone over this question. And I can skip it even though I'm already in the game show. I don't have to worry about that. Some answers will still have come through, but I can move forward if I so choose. Now on this last question, I want to bring you guys back to what I said before about the remediation documents and the tips and hints and help. One of the cool things for me is, obviously, we know the answer here. And to me, this is exactly the same question as the first question. So if I was teaching and I had a student who got the first question right and got this third question wrong, I would be confused as to what is the problem. I know you understand this. What aren't you getting? And those are some of the things that we kind of outline in our documents. And what was interesting to me that I never thought about before I saw this is, for a student, if the colored in squares are not consecutive, it may throw them off. So they may see this as being 2/5 blue, right? They may see this and completely ignore that last square. And those are some of the tips and tricks and look fors that you'll be able to see. So when you're wondering, hey, I wonder how come little Johnny is struggling in this area, well, here are some of the different ways. If you ask him this question and you see him answer like this will highlight to you what his specific problem is, because there's a multitude of ways to get to the same answer. And so you may not be able to follow as to which way and where your student dropped off. And that's kind of some of the stuff that we help with within the tool. And I think question 1 to question 3 is a great way of highlighting some of that. Now that we've kind of gone through and you guys have kind of seen how it all works, I'm going to end the question again. We see where everyone's at. Great. Finish the game. And this threshold here, over 50% of the class got it. You can remove it, you can lower it, you can raise it, you can set challenges for your students in terms of percentage, but you have the power to change all those things when you go in. And then you can go through and see how your class feels about it, and these numbers will go up as they go, so you kind of get that immediate feedback from your students in your classroom. We just did this. We just finished, and I already have game show date for today, the report that we just did, all of the students that were involved, who answered what, where, how. I have a quick snapshot look overall everything, and I can now share the screen because everything is private. No one sees anyone's name, everything is hidden, so no one has to feel embarrassed or look a certain way. At the same time, I can click on names hidden and see everybody's name. So I can now look at my students specifically. And this short report will be under their student report as well. So
Chad?
Go back over. Yes?
Chad, sorry, before you jump to the student mode, one of the things that we've added as a premium feature is what you see there in terms of good, satisfactory, and needs support. When there's a few different assessments that you've run against any learning outcome, it will actually cohort students in the good, satisfactory, and need support tab so that you can click into it and easily see who you might need to help. I just wanted to quickly point that out, and that's a premium feature. And then also you can actually see on any of these responses a student-by-student response for question-by-question response, sorry, for each question answered. And then one last thing is, I don't know if you showed this, Chad, I was responding to some questions. You can actually hide the names on this report as well.
Yes. Yeah. So it starts off hidden was the first thing we wanted to show. Okay. So now that as you can see, this is what Lionel was talking about, names hidden. So from here, there's a couple different places we can go. The first place that I want to show you is if I go back to my students, if you have a student who has actually run through this, you're going to be able to see their personal report on it. So let me go in here and just pick a random report. And this is a report that I did earlier with a different group, but little Lionel was a part of it. So I could see where he was within that group. Let me try and get back to our reports here. I see student gaps that are getting identified as we go through as well. Let's go back to the game show that we just played. In here, I can send to parents. And this is what it would look like if I was to send this to a parent. It would be specifically just their student. It would be how they did, if they completed all the questions, if they didn't complete all the questions, how many they got right. The parents can now look through the questions and review with their child at the same time, and they can even replay the game show at home. And that's kind of how we finish that whole environmental loop for the student so that they get that home support as well, and parents can follow along. And this is just specifically what you send to them. So they don't get to see this unless you so choose it. And at the bottom, you can see, you can choose which parents to send it to, and it'll be just linked to their own child's account. So that's that full circle there with the send to parents portion. That comes in real handy during parent-teacher time. And you can also measure growth. So we've done this, and I've looked at the answers, and I've seen, you know what? We only got 70% on question number 2. Maybe this is an area of struggle for everyone. I know we only got 70% because I skipped it, but let's say that people were actually struggling there. I can now go back, look through the gaps, try and remediate those gaps, and then click measure growth. And if I click measure growth, it's going to play a cloned activity, which is this exact same game show with different values for the same principles. So they can go in and it's new values, so they can't just copy their old answers, even though it's covering the exact same material. I'll be able to get the score, and I'll be able to show overall how much my class grew from the remediation materials that I kind of walk through with them. And that is really, really huge in terms of that whole formative assessment cycle that you run through. So right now, I think I've kind of ran a little bit long, but I really wanted to cover a lot of these materials here. And this is a quick wipe overview of all the different things we have within our system. And I'm sure when you guys get in there, there's plenty more that you can dive into. You can even share custom activities that you've created with other teachers as well. So if I'm in a section and I'm teaching with Lionel as well, and he's teaching the other section, and I want to run an activity in mine, I can share that exact activity to him, and he can open up and run it with his class as well. So there's so many different things that you can do. As you dive into it more, you'll find out more, but this is a nice quick overview for everyone. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here at this point.
Thanks, Chad. I'm just looking at the chat to make sure that we have been able to answer most of the questions that have come in. If you've put a question in the chat and we haven't answered it, feel free to either unmute, ask a question, or you can put it in the chat again. We're really excited to see all the questions and feedback coming in.
Awesome.
Well, just while we have a couple of seconds of quiet air here, I wanted to chime in. This is Mark McKenzie, the local Learning Solutions Manager for Southern Alberta. I'm going to put my email into the chat box here. As you're clicking around over the next few days, if you come up with any more questions, if there's any feedback that you have, anything at all, please don't hesitate to send me an email. It really helps me inform my practice, which is what we're all trying to do, is just trying to better inform our practice. So
Yeah, do you want to?
please don't hesitate to reach out.
And also this is Jocelyn. While we've got dead air a little bit too, Shelly and I are working with Lionel and Mark and Laura to see for next year what place Knowledgehook could have in our Calgary Catholic classrooms. So while you're attending the next 3 sessions, by the 3rd, we should have specific information on what it could look like in the fall. But in the meantime, you can have free access to a lot of this stuff because of all the COVID gap stuff. So we are working with Mark and Lionel and Laura to try and hammer out something for the fall so that all of our schools can have access to Knowledgehook at a premium level. So we'll keep you posted on that.
And just another note, just to thank you all for attending today. Your comments and questions in the chat box were fabulous. It's very clear to us, and we knew that already, but it's very clear today that there is a need for a tool like this within Calgary Catholic. So like Jocelyn said, we really encourage you to kind of dig in, check it out. You can definitely email Jocelyn and I with your questions, and we can pass them on to Mark as well. Once we get the video recording, we will send this out to you from today, along with the PowerPoint from Laura that she started off with. Please just watch your email. We did have a few problems with Zoom today, so I think we will probably switch over to the Teams platform for our next 2 meetings. But just watch your email, like I said, and spread the word. If you have friends and colleagues and, you know, within your school or other schools, please invite them to the next one. And, you know, we can share that link out and get more teachers on board with this.
Shelley, sorry, if I could add one thing, this is Lionel. In regards to the next session, I did get a couple questions in regards to whether it's going to be the same content. It's actually going to be part 2, and it's going to be very different from what was shared today. So please come back for that so you can learn a little bit more about what we can do to support you, and it will definitely be different content.
Lionel, do you anticipate, would there be a problem if people miss today and don't watch the video? If they join for the next one, would that be okay?
We will cover at least a little bit of what we covered today, just as a quick refresher. For those of you that may have took your afternoon nap during the presentation, we'll make sure we cover a little bit, and definitely for those that weren't in attendance, there'll be some form of what we covered here.
Yeah, Monica, that's a great question. Jocelyn and I have saved the chat from our chat room today. So we will put the FAQs together and then send all of that out along with Laura's PowerPoint and the video once all of that is ready and set to go. Anything else? Yeah, so thank you all for attending. We really do appreciate your time with us and your attention to all of the new information coming out with Knowledgehook, and we look forward to our next session next week. And anything else from Lionel, Laura, Mark, Chad?
No, thank you very much, Shelley. This is Lionel again, and you know, again, there was a lot of questions in regards to Mathletics and Knowledgehook, and I'll leave it up to Shelley and Jocelyn, you know, how that gets responded to. But you know, we're more than happy to dive a little bit deeper in terms of the differences as well. So thank you for all of those questions. You know, I wish I could have gone into more detail on that, but we're certainly happy to answer those questions at the appropriate time.
Thanks everyone for taking time out to listen to us today, and we hope you learned some really good information, and we're excited to have you all join next week as well. Tell your friends.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great rest of the week.
Bye.